let's talk about how to keyframe our video effects over time. Now let me first show you a title sequence where I have a few keyframed effects that help highlight my title in an artsy way. Okay, so let's take a look at the effects that we're working with here. I'm going to just make sure my clip is selected and then come up to Effect Controls. So there are two effects, the Gaussian Blur and Bevel Edges. Let's first look at Bevel Edges. From the first keyframe to the second keyframe, the beveled edges move towards the center. Then from the second keyframe to the third, it remains static. Then from the third to the fourth, it animates back out, okay? In addition, you have some light changes. So under light angle, you'll notice that from this keyframe to this keyframe, it changes. All right, so from this point to this point, you can see the light sort of move clockwise around the video frame. And then in addition, you have the Gaussian blur. There's no blur at all up to this point, and then it very quickly blurs and then remains blurred to the third keyframe and then very quickly unblurs. Okay, so let's create this. I'm going to go to my pre-keyframe sequence and select my clip and then go to Effects, and let's apply our Gaussian blur and our bevel edges. Okay, I'm going to do beveled edges first. So we're going to move to the beginning of the clip, and you can see here that we have the title already in place. So I want the first set of keyframes to happen right before the title. So we're going to come to edge thickness, and we want our initial value of edge thickness to be 0. So I'm going to type in 0 here. You can see the bevel edges go away. But now I'm going to click on my stopwatch, and this is telling Premiere that I want to start animating the effect. So from here to here is where I want the first part of the animation. So I can click on Add Keyframe and then change this value. I'm going to change it to 0.4. All right, I'm going to play over this so you can see how that looks. Okay, and then so we want it to remain at this level until after the title. And then we place another keyframe, which should also be at 0.4. And then we just move to the very end, and we'll add a last keyframe and put it at 0. Again, I could manually select Add Keyframe and then bring that back down to 0, or I just bring it back down to 0, and then you can see that the keyframe was automatically added. Premiere knows that I'm adding keyframes as long as the stopwatch is enabled. Okay, so the beveled edges is doing what I want, and the other thing that we want to have happen is for the light angle to change. So I'm going to go to next keyframe on edge thickness, and this is where I'm going to come down to light angle and toggle my animation. And then we'll come to this keyframe, so I'll go to next keyframe, and now I need to change my light angle value. So I can just grab my value shuttle and drag and sort of visually match it up. Or I think I'm actually going to type in 120 so that it's on the other side of the frame as when we started. Okay, so let's play it. All right, so that's working. Now let's go ahead and animate our blur. So we want the blur to happen from this point to this point during the title. So I'm going to go back to my second set of keyframes, and then I'll click on my blurriness stopwatch. So we still want it to be 0 here, but just very shortly after that, we want it to quickly animate to a higher value. So I'm going to just bring this up to about 45 or so. And now let's go to this set of keyframes. So we'll go to the next set of keyframes. And by this point, we want it to be back to 0. So I'm going to set a keyframe here, and then just slightly in from that, we'll add another keyframe. All right, so it should still be 45 here, but by this point, we want it to be 0. So I'll back that off to 0. All right, and I'll play over this one more time. Okay. Now, we've already talked about order of operations in this chapter, but I do want to show you what happens if you apply the bevel edges and then the blur instead of the way it's happening right now. So let me just drag the blur down. All right, and I'm going to play over this now, and you can see that it's a very different result. All right, you can see that the blur is actually affecting my edges, which is not what I want. I want the blur to only affect the video underneath. So I'm going to move bevel edges last. All right, and now we have our crisp edges and the blurred video, which is what we want. All right, so that is applying and adjusting keyframes in video effects. Keep practicing as you add multiple effects to your clips, and keyframing will come more and more natural as you continue editing.